I'm an interior designer with Cascadia Architects. We're a small firm based out of Victoria, BC. We work on a range of projects, from multifamily to commercial, educational, and healthcare. In the office, my main focus is working on multifamily, but I've been diving into rendering software for the past 2 years and developing our standards in that sense. And so that's kind of where I got into Gendo and trying to streamline our process and just making things a bit more efficient. But yeah, it's been exciting.
Awesome, thank you. So I guess Bianca, it would be great if you could elaborate a little more on what your process was like before, to make a comparison.
Yeah, it's it's strange trying to determine like when to put all of the detail work into a rendering image. It's like so early on in the project phases, we're seeing more people expecting high quality visualizations, but that does take a lot of time. And so our process used to be like really refining the model in Revit, getting the materials to standard, and just really spending a lot of time up front modeling. And then using Enscape exports, going into Photoshop. We did have an office standard in Photoshop of layers we typically used, filters we added, that kind of thing. But it was a very time intensive task, especially early on in the project if you're going to be changing the model. And so I found with Gendo, I can just export an Enscape image and really use Gendo to up the atmosphere, create life in the image, and do the heavy lifting rather than spending so much time creating layers. But it is
Yeah,
still, I do find it still a back and forth with Photoshop. It's not as time intensive, definitely, but I think there's always going to be some refinement and tweaking with Photoshop.
yeah, cool. So you're taking things out of your CAD package into Enscape, doing a,
Hmm.
you do an Enscape then before that sort of transition.
Sorry.
How far do you go in Enscape before you then take it into Gendo?
Um, I still find that we're getting the materials to a pretty refined spot in Enscape. And I think now what we're not focusing on so heavily is site massing and context. We used to spend a lot of time building context models and massing. And not only did it take a lot of time to ensure that we're doing it accurately, like referencing ArcGIS and mapping, but it also just made the model really heavy. And when we're cloud sharing and using like multiple people are working on it, it would take like 10 minutes to sync and it would just make everything so much slower. And so I think completely just kind of disregarding site context now in the beginning and just focusing on the building modeling is what we've been doing. But I would say our materials are still quite refined in Enscape before we export it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then that last touch in Photoshop, sort of post-Gendo, what are the
Hmm.
things that you're doing there?
Um, I find sometimes in Gendo it changes some small aspects. I find wood slat walls are really tough. And so I kind of just take a bunch of different clips that I've used, like rendering or enhancing or just the style tool, and I kind of paste them all together. And so I do think I still run it through Gendo like one more time just for an enhanced tool. But it's kind of like I'm clipping the image together and taking parts that I like from different exports. And then I run it through Gendo one more time. Or I add people over it because sometimes I find that when you put the Enscape people into Gendo, they look a little wonky. And so I'll just throw like a Photoshop person over top and then just mask it out.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
clipping.
yeah.
It's still like clipping everything. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, we've got a couple of exciting new tools that I think are very relevant to those
I
bits.
did use the quick populate. It was great. Yeah. I
Excellent,
was like,
good.
oh, they're
We'll
not
maybe
crazy looking.
we'll
Hmm.
definitely dive into that before the end of the discussion. But it might be great then if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen and perhaps showing a couple of the bit projects you've been working on in Gendo.
Yeah. So this was the first project I've ever used Gendo on. It's a, we're saying it's a renovation and addition, but we're actually just maintaining like two of the foundation walls. So I'm not really sure how much of a renovation it is. But it's a custom home and it's a quite unique site. It slopes a lot. And I think a big thing was trying to get the clients to visualize how the building would look. It is a quite contemporary modern design and they've never done something like this before. So we really wanted to use Gendo to just get the vision across and just show them like, yes, it's a black building, but it can look very sleek and elegant. And so this was the Enscape export. I had basic like massing in there from just the Enscape like context tool, but I didn't really have any of the site context. And since it's a residential area, we don't have Google Earth imagery from the back of the lot, which was what I was struggling with. We could find some from the front of the lot, but it still wasn't quite useful. And so, Enscape export, I had a series of prompts, but I did find that using the AI enhancer really helped in the prompts and refining them. So just wanted like a exterior photography style residential building, preserving the architecture, clean lines, geometric forms, soft natural light, sharp focus, high detail, that kind of thing. And then this was one of the first ones it came out with. I think the biggest, um, the whole goal of using Gendo was to make the material look a bit more realistic and then get that nice glow in the windows. So I wasn't too focused on like what it was doing to the chairs or the planting in this stage. And I also knew that it wasn't going to give me the right, like I was going to have to tweak the slat walls and things, which was fine, but I wanted to just get this reading nicely. And so a few of the iterations, I think this is the one I used initially to clip into Photoshop. And then as it progressed, I had just like Photoshop clip outs of trees in sight, but they're obviously like they were quite sporadically placed. And I just overlaid a layer from Enscape, like a sketchy line to just add some texture to it. But this was still not where I wanted it to be. So I used the enhance tool in this one a couple of times, and it just started cleaning everything up quite nicely and making it look more cohesive. I found that it was reading the ceiling inside as wood as well, where it was just the wood paneling. And so I had to do some Photoshop tweaking to just get that reading as white ceiling. But
Mm.
after clipping it a few times, I realized I wasn't getting much more. I feel like it maxed out in the architectural like changes, and then I wanted to focus on the atmosphere. And so I was using a bunch of different photos that I liked the lighting, but I also to make sure it was coming from the right direction because the sunset would be coming from this way. And so I didn't want to use images where the light was coming from the corners, but I liked what it was doing to the site after enhancing it a few times. And I think this was the final export or this one. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, that looks great.
Mhm.
The step between your sort of Photoshop landscaping, which obviously, as you say, looks very like clippy, just sort of dragged and dropped
Mhm.
nice and quick, um, but through to the enhance one,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
what
from this to this, like it's
yeah,
so much better.
yeah, yeah, and that does take an age in Photoshop to do well as well. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
also just the atmosphere and getting like it's so tough to get a nice sky from just like Google Earth
Mm.
or like or Google Images and just like throwing a sky in and then clipping it and trying to make sure the colors are coming from the nice like places. It's so tough to just get that down. And so I think that's where Gendo has like really helped just making this whole atmosphere look really nice.
And did it work with your clients? Were they convinced?
They really like the building now. Yeah. They're big fans of a black house. Like they're like, oh, we love black siding and it looks so cool. And yeah, it was great. I think it's really good too because I find a lot of like multifamily developers, they've done this before and so they know the process of visualizing and they understand like they're going to see it when it's done and they're comfortable with that. Whereas like clients that are doing single family homes, it's like this is their house and they
Mm.
haven't done this a bunch of times and they're not really the same comfort level isn't there of just visualizing and knowing that's what it's going to look like. They need a little more just like full photos. They need to be able to see it more. And so I think that's where this is really helpful, like showing them realistic renderings.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. So then, I guess throwing back then to your previous process, how much time do you think you saved doing it this way rather than the way you would have done?
Oh, like a couple hours at least, I think. Yeah. Typically I would have like gone in and it was so time intensive. Like I would go and select all the windows and then throw a layer over that had a sky reflection and
Mm.
tweak it enough to make the inside glow. And sometimes I would go as far as to add like light fixtures. Like we usually have, like it did pick up where our light fixtures were. It does look a little wonky, but this actually
Mm.
may not be the final. I think I've changed the final one. I think this was the final one. Yeah, this looks a bit too brown. But it picks up where the light fixtures are, but sometimes I would go in and like enhance those or go and throw, I did typically actually make a layer for each material in the building. So I would select all of this and then I would do the metal paneling and I would throw another texture over top of it to make it more realistic. So there's a lot of like layers and building layers. But when the windows are changing and it's like going from schematic design to design development, and those are when the big like architectural and structural changes are happening, you're gonna have to be like exploding those layers and restarting every single time. And that would just take like hours of work. So just streamlining that with this has been really helpful.